Mrs. Anna Belleville, sensitive remorse, moral pain, and the beginning of inner reconstruction. The testimony of the Spirit. Mrs. Anna Belleville, presented in the second part of Heaven and Hell, delicately and profoundly reveals how sensitive consciousness can suffer intensely when it perceives, after passing, the moral consequences of choices made without full reflection, even if not marked by significant visible faults. Mrs. Anna Belleville manifests with clarity and preserved identity, but in a state of sadness and inner unrest. Her suffering does not arise from deliberately evil acts, but from a life led with excessive concern for herself, with poorly processed emotions and little attention to broader moral development. Upon awakening in the spiritual realm, this gap becomes evident. Modern depth psychology helps to understand this state. Emotionally sensitive people, when they do not develop emotional maturity and self-responsibility, tend to carry unresolved internal conflicts. When the distractions of material life cease, consciousness comes into direct contact with these emotional tendencies, generating suffering that calls for elaboration and transformation. Spiritism clarifies that Mrs. Anna Belleville's pain is not punishment, but rather a result of the awakening of consciousness. She realizes that she could have lived with more emotional balance, greater attention to others, and a deeper commitment to lasting values. This recognition is painful, but it represents an essential step in the evolutionary process. Modern science reinforces this reading by demonstrating that psychological growth requires integration between emotion and responsibility. Ununderstood and unrefined emotions tend to dominate internal experience. On the spiritual plane, where consciousness expands, these emotions call for conscious reorganization. Another important point of the testimony is the presence of sincere, albeit fragile, remorse. Mrs. Anna Belleville feels real regret for not having better seized the opportunities for moral growth. This remorse, when accompanied by reflection and a desire for change, becomes a transformative force. Suffering, at this stage, has an educational function. Spiritism teaches that this state is not definitive. As consciousness learns to accept the past without being imprisoned by it and directs its emotions towards repair and learning, suffering gradually dissolves. Spiritual life offers continuous paths for new beginnings, according to the inner effort of each spirit. This testimony also invites us to reflect on the importance of emotional maturity while still alive. Developing emotional balance, taking responsibility for one's own feelings, and being mindful of the impact of our choices prevents unnecessary future pain. Emotion without awareness generates suffering. Understood emotion generates growth. Mrs. Anna Belleville represents many sensitive consciousnesses that have not learned to transform feeling into virtue. Her account reminds us that feeling deeply is not the same as living well. Spiritual evolution demands elevated feelings, but also direction, reflection, and moral responsibility. Reflecting on this testimony is an invitation to self-compassion and a commitment to one's own transformation. Growing emotionally now is an act of care for the future of one's own consciousness. If this account helped you reflect on sensitivity, regret, and emotional maturity, like, share, and leave your comment. Your participation helps this message reach more people.